Good morning, everyone. You're listening to 91.7 The Edge, WSCW Whitewater. This is your host, Ken, of the Farms Radio Show. Farms Radio Show is sponsored by the Wisconsin Farms Oral History Project. You can find us at wisconsinfarms.org. Once again, that's wisconsinfarms.org. I got three wonderful guests today from the campus group S.A.G.E. So right now, I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about who they are.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is John, and I'm the secretary of S.A.G.E.
I'm Corbin, just a general member.
I'm Sarah. I'm also a general member.
Alrighty, fantastic. Well, hey, thank you so much, guys, for coming on the show today. I think we're going to have a great discussion. And with that being said, our topic for today is tar sands. So I'm sure a lot of people have, whether they kept up with news and whatnot, most people have heard of it, but I'm sure a lot of people don't know the details. That's what we're going to talk about today, and what your guys' thoughts are on tar sands. So, and we're also going to talk about divestments, and we'll get into that later about what that is and what it means and how it relates to the fossil fuel industry. So, without further ado, I want you guys to give me a little bit of an explanation of what is tar sands and why it's relevant. You can tell me, such as, to give a few little facts about it too, is that it's mostly in Canada right now, in Alberta region, I assume you're referring to. Yes. Why don't we start from there and tell me why it's relevant and why it's become noteworthy?
Well, okay, so tar sands are a combination of water, sand, clay, and bitumen, which is a toxic chemical. And these tar sands are found in sand, and they retrieve their oil from the sand with an extraction process, which causes extreme damage to the environment and also the atmosphere as a whole. In addition, these fossil fuels lead to a very high amount of carbon emissions, which is the number one cause of climate change all around the world. And here in 2016 or 2017, the number one issue we face as humanity as a whole is climate change. So action needs to be taken against tar sands in order to mitigate climate change and maybe reverse some of the negative effects we're already seeing all around the world today.
Okay. So what I know about tar sands right now too, and we can go more into why this is such a concern and go more in depth on that. So it's become a big industry, I know. It's something that's much more recent, and the reason it took off, I would say, is because people need fuel. And it's something that with newer technology is become more able to mine. And with that, there's a big reservoir in Alberta, Canada, that makes up, like along with them in Venezuela, from what I know of, it takes up makes about 2 trillion barrels of oil a year. So that's a lot. And I can understand from an economic standpoint why people are going to get involved with that. Mm-hmm. But it seems that the concern, the debate around this is the willingness to move forward with this industry specifically, not just like the entire oil industry aside. Tar sands is different from regular oil in how it uses water, and just as you were saying earlier, its impact on the climate. So can you tell me, like, maybe some more of your concerns with that, or a starting point to go along with that?
Aside from the carbon emissions that it produces, it also is a huge contributor to deforestation. Mm-hmm. I know that the Alberta tar sands are responsible for, I think, a little over 200 acres of forests being destroyed, and 300 more have been approved to be destroyed in the future. And it also uses, I don't know how much, I think it's 4 times more or something, a lot more water to produce the oil.
Yeah. The producing tar sands oil, it takes about 3 barrels of fresh water to produce 1 barrel of tar sands oil.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is a huge concern because we already have a concern about freshwater accessibility to begin with. Mm-hmm. So if we're just throwing all this water into the production of something that's hurting the environment even more, it's kind of a major concern.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that might come to mind to me right away is there better ways that can be handled with this? Because I know that some companies are very sloppy with the way that they do their cleanup. Is this a situation that can be cleaned up better, or is there better technology that can be exist and focused on?
As far as spills go?
Yeah, as far as potential spills or just the general mining process
As far as like spills go, the companies consider it total cleanup and a success if they clean up 15% of the spill. So going off the spills, we honestly have to make them more like aware of what an actual, like what the detrimental of an act, like the damage spills actually have on the environments. And
you can't clean up tar sands as much as like an oil spill. Regular oil just stays on the top of the water, so it's easier to filter out and get out of there, but tar sands sink right to the bottom of the river or wherever it's getting spilled into. So in order to clean that up, you'd have to pretty much dig up all of the bottom of the body of water that you're trying to clean, and that's basically impossible. So as far as spills go, tar sands are one of the worst because it's just sinks directly to the bottom and you can't see it, so they pretend it's not there, and it harms the wildlife and the freshwater sources, like where people get their drinking water from. It's just...
Absolutely. And also because this the tar sands, they sink and they don't naturally rise, a lot of times these spills, they will go months or a very long period of time before being detected.
Yeah, even
and this can cause, and that will cause a lot of damage to the ecosystem as a whole, because I believe early detection would help minimize the amount of oil that's actually spilled. But because tar sands naturally don't rise, it's very difficult to detect the spills early.
And I think people kind of undermine the amount of spills that actually happen. I think a lot of people who are on the side of the oil industry, they say like, oh, oil spills are so rare, but either they're not being detected or they're not being released. The information is being withheld from the public because they happen so much more often than the general public is aware of, which makes it hard to go against it because people aren't getting the full story of what the damage is actually amounting to, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like something that's even coming from, say, an ordinary citizen's more middle ground standpoint, where say that they might be more neutral on ordinary oils, that especially with that 15% for cleanup percentage, it certainly sounds like that's the big concern here, that other people that might say, for example, support other pipelines are much more reluctant or concerned about this specific part of the fossil fuels industry because of how dangerous it is. And it's, I think, in my mind, become obvious of why it's become so popular, because there's a lot of investment potential for Canada to invest in this. They have so much of this in their country, and from an economic standpoint, a lot of people see positives from, because it's all coming from one central location that we have pretty good relations with too, among Western world speaking, compared to say the Middle East, where some of those might be different, but
Hard to fly it over the Atlantic anymore.
And what I noticed are some concerns with people is that this will either enable this industry to be more normalized than it should become, and as concerns are not looking at future effects or being easily dismissed as something that technology will eventually catch up on, instead of saying that let's focus on the current issues we have with it. So from an economic standpoint, it's viable, and a lot of people that might have jobs with this will retaliate, and a lot of people that I think ourselves are very concerned, I would say reasonably so, for its long-term effects. So
I think it's easy to dismiss it when you're not being affected directly by it as well. Like the people who are actually living near these tar sands and these big oil extraction sites are being the most affected by it. And they're the ones with the least amount of voice. They can't get out there and fight this because they're just regular town people. They don't have people there to help them and get their voices heard because they're being silenced by these big companies.
Yes. In addition, these people who are living near to the tar sands mining sites, they're exposed to a wide variety of toxic chemicals. And actually, people living in Alberta, Canada, have higher cancer rates than a normal person.
And their drinking water is being tainted, and their ecosystems are being, what would you call it? Deteriorated, destroyed. They're just all these effects of this industry that we can kind of turn a blind eye to because we're here and we don't have to see firsthand what it's doing to these people.
Okay. I certainly understand that. I think what I'd like to talk about is why don't we first talk about some of the environmental impacts, and then after that we can discuss the economic impacts of this industry. And while we're discussing those things too, we can also go into what's being done in regards to this on either side. It can be, honestly, but what's being done on more of a state or national level, and then we can discuss what you guys specifically, S.A.G.E, are doing in response to this event, or this industry, I should say. So from an environmental side, I know that, just to reiterate what you were saying too, that the way the sand is the tar sands is basically, this oil is made up of, when it's underground, it's so far underground, it's so viscous that it can't be extracted, so that and it's made up of sand, clay, water, and I'm trying bitumen. Thank you. Yes. I couldn't remember the name of the actual oil itself. And so there's a lot of different kinds of mining that could be done for this too. But from what I've seen, that the major concern of this is just how it's mined. And so why don't you tell me a little bit more about how it's mined and how that affects the environment around it and how far that reaches?
Well, there's surface mining you can do. But then once the supply is gone from surface mining, you have to do, I don't know what it's called, but they're
open pit
just,
mining.
Yeah, that they just dig massive pits in the ground and just continue to go deeper and deeper and get more, as much as they can, and it makes for not a very friendly place for animals and plants to flourish.
They start blasting fresh water into the ground to raise up the tar sands to the top so it can be extracted. But with all this water, when it's blasting out this toxic, basically this toxic sludge, they have to put it somewhere. So they create these tailing ponds where they just pump in all of this toxic waste, and to animals and everything, it looks just like a duck's lake flying over. It just looks like another lake to them. So they will land in it, and there have been a lot of cases where 200, 300 ducks have flown into these tailing ponds, and it's just killed the entire flock.
They get stuck in this murky, sticky, gross water, and they don't realize it until it's too late. And
many of these companies have been sued for the and fined for the interactions with these animals, that deer will come up and try to drink out of it, ducks flying into it, just a bunch of animals trying to interact with this toxic sludge, and companies just continuously pay millions of dollars in fines and just say, sorry, we'll try better next time.
I think I read somewhere that the size of the actual tailing ponds that they make is bigger than Vancouver itself, which is
these
pretty
tailing
concerning.
ponds, they can get so large that you can even see them from space.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that they're that big. I knew that they were big, but I wasn't aware of just maybe the scale of them. The only reference I have is I saw on a little map referencing where it's located, which is kind of north and northwest of, say, Edmonton area. Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot of land being used for that too. And
I think people forget that you have to put the water somewhere. It doesn't just go away. It's got to go.
And when you add an unnatural source of water to an ecosystem, it affects every living thing that lives around it.
And when they flood, there's been a lot of occurrences where a natural flood happens, but they get into these tailing ponds and they flood over and get all into the grassy areas, the fields and everything. Trees are destroyed, that kind of thing. That's just a lot more dangerous than
it is seems. Impossible for an ecosystem to survive and thrive near a tailing pond.
And do these tailing ponds, these areas, how far do they expand outwards, or is that something that occurs with these situations, or can they be more isolated?
Well, I think it's hard to contain them because of the size, but I think they vary. Different areas have different sized waste stations, I guess you could call them. But yeah, it's pretty hard to contain that sort of large scale. I don't know. It's like it's basically just a pond. So think of if you have a heavy rainfall, any ponds or high watered rivers are going to overflow. Those are going to overflow too. So anytime they get an increased amount of natural water.
Even during dry seasons, though, this is an issue that will affect the entire ecosystem because, like many animals who are living around these tailing ponds, they'll be needing the water due to it being dry, and they'll be drinking it, and like they won't be able to live drinking tailing ponds. So they'll probably instantly kill them.
Okay. I think we already touched on this, especially just recently. But can you give me more of the reason behind why tar sands might be more dangerous than regular oil? And what differentiates tar sands from basically the rest of the industry, like for the actual mining process itself, I mean, and the effect on the environment?
I think, the difference with the actual process, probably just more water usage, and it's more susceptible to uncleanable spills, I guess you could say.
Yes.
And the more detrimental aspect of it as far as compared to crude oil, would it be? Just regular liquidy oil it's extremely heavy, so it just sinks to wherever it spills from. And it's very kind of sticky and I don't know, relentless pretty much. It doesn't give very easily when you're trying to change it, either cleaning it or moving it. It just is more stubborn than a liquid oil.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we have a pretty good understandings about the effects of tar sands now and its environmental impacts. So I like to talk about the economics and the industry involved too. And I think once we get into the economics part, that'll make a nice segue into the concept of divestments. So let's start off, where does this industry exist? Is it just like primarily within Canada and Venezuela? We know it's mined. How far out does this reach to?
Canada, Alberta, Canada, and Venezuela are the two big ones for tar sands. I don't think there are many other large extractions.
Because like the people just found out about tar sands a few years ago, there hasn't been too many like places besides Canada and Venezuela where they're mined. But
Saudi Arabia would be the largest oil place to get oil from, but it's not tar sands. Yeah,
because I did read up on that too, that apparently Alberta region is these, like, once again, besides Saudi Arabia, maybe arguably Iran too, that they do, in the entire industry, have the second largest reservoir. And you can correct me if I'm wrong in this. I believe that the reason this took off, all environmental effects aside, was that they realized potential of just all this oil that was there, and they just probably got right into it. I'm sure it's something that's existed there for a while, but I guess recent technology allowed it to be at least mineable to the people in this industry.
I think the bigger companies are trying to get out of the Middle East. So I think Canada is their segue for that. They're trying to pull all of the reliance of oil out of Saudi Arabia, Iran, those areas, because obviously there's some conflicts going on in that area. So I think we're trying to pull out of there.
All right. So to go more into why this has become more normalized, a lot of people are like the idea of just having a reliable source of oil from Canada. But as we know now, a lot of people are very concerned about the effects of tar sands, its mining process, and just how dangerous it is. So
pipelines go into it too. You have to keep in mind that in order to use what we are extracting from these tar sands, we need pipelines, which there's been a lot of news on the DAPL, but it's not the only pipeline that is bringing it to the south. I think Texas mostly, like south of the United States, to get it to oil that we can actually use rather than just these tar sands.
Is it mostly just a couple companies that are investing in this? Like I heard too online that I guess other countries like China are investing in this as well. Can you give me any more insight on that too, of who's supporting?
I think a lot of
too. Enbridge is a huge supporter of these pipelines. They have a few that run from Canada down to Springfield, out to just like Kansas, different cities around. And so they're probably one of the biggest investors in these tar sand pipelines that are running them all over the U.S.
As far as other countries, I would say a lot of them are becoming more aware of the detrimental effects of it. And obviously, people aren't just going to start dropping like flies. They're not going to, pull out immediately and just rely on no oil. But they're starting to definitely slow because of the Paris Agreement and different regions of the world that are trying to actually help rather than continue to harm. So
and usually these like third world countries across the world are the ones who are seeing the effects of climate change in the strongest fashion. And because like here in America we haven't been seeing like very many obvious effects of climate change yet, a lot of Americans just believe, since we're not seeing it, we don't really believe in climate change. But all around the world, everyone is being affected by it. So that's why other countries are taking a more stronger stance against tar sands. And
because they're seeing it more firsthand than we are. Because we're very comfortable here. It's very easy for us to ignore the harm in things because we are not forced into being exposed to it. But as far as, I know you mentioned China, I know that they are taking steps to reduce their reliance on oil, even though they are a huge manufacturing and, what would you call it, really, production, I guess. They're very big industry as far as product manufacturing and stuff like that.
There's a reason.
They're still trying. Go for
it. There's a reason you don't see any of the big oil refineries in like near New York, near San Francisco, near Chicago. It's because these cities are some of the biggest consumers of the oil, but they make it obvious like, but we don't want it near us. We just want the oil. So that's why you see them putting refineries out in like North Dakota, Texas, and places that are not as populated, but just so it's out of sight, out of mind. All I know is my car runs the next day.
Right,
And I think that is a very good point to make, that it can be easy to not think about the long-term effects, and especially if it doesn't directly affect you. In regards to like the climate change argument, I know I already had an entire discussion with Juk Bhattacharya last semester on just a general discussion of climate change. And I know that especially like in northern hemisphere countries, it's a lot harder to see those effects compared to like countries that are more towards the equator. So it is something that's, I mean, like people could on both sides of the spectrum say that, like, oh, it's like we're in the middle of Wisconsin right now. It's like there's no snow, and it's like, oh, climate change. And it'll snow the next day. It's like, oh, look, there's snow, no climate change. But I think you do have to look at the global temperatures too. So with that being said, you also mentioned too that this isn't something that's just going to change overnight. As nice as some people just like say we don't need this, I think many people's concerns come into play too. And I was trying to listen to some debates on this too by two gentlemen. One was a professor. I think his name was like Bill and something. Oh, I want to say Bill Murray, but it's obviously not that. But there's a professor and another gentleman too, Alex Epstein, they were talking about the oil industries as well. And a lot of people I know were very centralist, where they believe that both people had really good points too. And I think one of the things I hear being discussed a lot too on this is that how can we become less reliable on tar sands, and how can we enable energy intake for the people like just everyday ourselves that do drive vehicles and whatnot. How can we start making it so that tar sands and some of just dangerous fossil fuels don't become normalized? I think this will make a great segue into divestments too. So we can talk a little bit about that. I'll let you guys just define for our audience what divestments are and how that comes to play a role into this.
As far as changes you can make to try to contribute to the, lessening of reliance on oil, just little changes that will reduce your overall carbon footprint, because basically any energy you use, any gasoline, any sort of energy, really, any energy you use is either coming from coal or oil, or, natural gas too, but, so just even small changes like trying to walk to class rather than driving every day, or doing bigger loads of laundry instead of smaller loads more often, or turning off the lights when you don't need them, using less hot water and more like warm or cold water when you can, just things that don't require as much energy, and it saves you money too, I guess, in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of things that you can do to just kind of reduce your usage of certain things that would very minutely, but still significantly enough, change the way that we see and need oil.
In addition, society needs to take more of a open stance on renewable energy, like wind energy and solar energy, because these are renewable and sustainable ways to provide energy, and these can be used for years on end, and they won't eventually run out like these non-renewable resources, which we are currently using for energy.
I mean, if solar energy runs out, we're screwed anyway, so as soon as the sun stops working, we don't have a chance, so solar energy is always going to be there as long as we are. But yeah, wind energy, even there's hydropower that is coming into play, just bigger companies especially, because it's hard to, ask college kids to install solar panels on the roofs of their houses, but companies, restaurants, schools, different bigger industries that have more money and access to things can try to integrate renewable energy into their businesses rather than just relying on coal and oil. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is getting these companies to do that, because it is not as economically preferable as they would like it. It will cost them a little bit of money initially, but in the long run, it ends up saving money and saving the environment more than using oil.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that too. One of the most, because I've discussed with people once again on both spectrums, and on the pro-oil choice, one of the most common arguments I hear is what oil has done for us. And while I certainly do agree that, it's like coal had its place too in history, oil has had its place in history. But I think that unnecessarily advocating for something that there are alternative options to. And just by saying that, maybe, let's say, a lot of the alternative options don't have that much investments in them, and are usually just easily dismissed as, this is just kind of like a new age idea that just won't work, or and especially with people that might not argue well on the alternative side, some of these people easily dismiss this, and it can be understandably so. But I think that having better discussions on alternative energy might normalize that more, and can slowly start making that transition, such as how coal transitioned into oil and other energies like that too, that were more safer. Because I know with oil, it's not like we're going to be running out of it anytime soon. We still have a lot left, but just because it's there doesn't mean we have to use it. It doesn't mean we have to use it. So I think that what you're saying too, with a lot of these bigger companies, It's almost like the way I tend to see it too is like with a lot of the oil industries is that I'm not concerned about oil itself. I'm more concerned about oil lobbyists, which is where the divestments will come into play too, of people advocating the alternative sources.
And before we get started on divestment, it has to be said that we are not trying to get this point across that we need to pull out of oil cold turkey. It's not smart or sensible to try to say that everyone needs to drop oil right now.
Yeah.
And, it's a transition, like you said. It's a process. It needs to be slowly weaned off of rather than just trying to throw it aside and rely on other things right away.
I think that's the most misunderstood argument with all this is that people saying that, oh, you're just trying to get rid of all this we work for. It's like, no, we're not trying to. We're just trying to transition.
Exactly.
And because the climate change is real, it's I can link people to other discussions on that too. All I can go by is what the majority of the consensus says.
Yeah.
And assume by that too. And with that being said, I think that making at least having the discussion at minimum about the transition is something that's extraordinarily necessary and a very moral thing to do. So with that being said, though, I'll let you guys continue on the topic of that.
Divestment.
Yeah, I actually had something I wanted to add.
Certainly.
Instead of going backwards and taking our resources out of these non-renewable fossil fuels, we're instead expanding our reliance on fossil fuels. We're trying to continuously build more and more pipelines. But when is that going to stop? Because this is a non-renewable resource we're dealing with here, and it is leading to catastrophic effects for the local environment and the environment of the world as a whole. So basically, we're not asking for to take away pipelines, take away our oil, take away all that. Right. We're just asking to stop the expansion of it.
And reverse as slowly and comfortably, maybe even not comfortably. It's goes to be said that being a little uncomfortable in order to get a good change, there's nothing wrong with that. And if we have to sacrifice a couple things, if we have to, drive less or have to deal with having lights on less or something like that, it's really not even remotely close to as much suffering as people are being put through because of the negative effects of all these climate changes. So divestment and trying to reverse or halt and then kind of backtrack our reliance on oil is important enough to kind of get it out there and get into these people's heads that we're not trying to say all right, stop driving your cars, don't turn any lights on, go off the map, live in a tent in the middle of the woods, and just kind of reversing, slowing down rather than continuing to live this crazy fast-paced, terrifyingly out of control spiral down. You know what I mean? It's just we want to slow it down and kind of rationalize things. So divesting funds from these companies is just the first step in being able to make renewable energy sources more widely available, because it is very hard for people to access this kind of energy. And I think the first step is slowing down these big oil companies first, and then kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, now what can we use other than oil solely, And that's where solar panels and wind energy and hydropower, all that comes into play. But the access is kind of tricky for people sometimes.
Okay. And with the advocating for change here, we can go into first more we can honestly do this in any order if you want. You should start more of a micro level with just S.A.G.E, or if you want to go to a more macro level of, say, Wisconsin or the United States. I'll let you determine which order you want to just go in on that, or you just make it easier. Why don't we just start off with S.A.G.E? What's being done in advocacy for this, and is there any ideas, there might be alternative ideas that we're not sure if 100% they work, or any actual actions you're taking in response to this? Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, right now, or last semester at least. We have not done anything this semester because it's the first week still, but last semester we had tabling events that we just kind of raised awareness about tar sands and what the effects are, and kind of just fun facts as much as we can get this information to people who don't really think about it as much. College kids are more preoccupied with other things, but we had different tabling events and different, I don't know, seminars. We had a movie that we showed, Whitewater Black Gold, was it?
Yeah.
About just the oil industry and tar sands, and just kind of trying to give information to people who don't necessarily have a wide amount of it. And we have a petition going. Is it still open right now?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We're still trying to get signatures on it. We are trying to get signatures on a petition to stop the expansion of the Line 61 pipeline, which is a pipeline that flows through Wisconsin and actually is close to 3 miles away from Whitewater. So this is a pipeline that is affecting all of us here as students directly.
And it's, if it was, I think what we were saying is if there was a spill, with that particular line, the entire university would be affected. We'd all have to evacuate the area. So classes would be stopped. People's jobs would be stopped. People's lives would have to be paused. And most of us don't have another place to easily go to in the area. We're either from out of state or from farther away, or we don't have access to another place to flee if something were to happen with this line and spills or anything. So we're trying to basically show our solidarity with not supporting the expansion of this. And I don't know how many signatures we have so far, but we had a lot going last time I checked in December. There are a lot of people who are showing support for this.
I'm unsure of the exact number of signatures we have, but this is not just a movement that Whitewater is doing. A lot of universities across the state are also trying to sign the same petition. And basically, as a whole, the students from each university are going to go to Enbridge, the company behind this pipeline, and we're each going to say, like us, for example, we're going to say the students of UW-Whitewater do not support the expansion of the Line 61 pipeline. And then, like, the students at, like, Stevens Point, for example, will
Lacrosse, and
I
think every UW school is doing
every
it.
UW school has this
Madison,
petition
Platteville.
coming around with them.
Okay.
Oshkosh, all of them. So it's more than just us here. You know, like a couple dozen members of S.A.G.E at UW-Whitewater. It's a statewide movement in the UW schools, but also other areas as well. And I think it's more of an issue than people like to realize it is. But we're working on pulling out funding for fossil fuels in general.
Okay. And have you had any interesting responses in these attempts to galvanize the community, or any just interesting commentary, whether it be from students, other companies, or like are they generally
people that have passed by? We have tabling in the UC usually. We had like twice a week for like a couple, like 2 months. We had it twice a week, so it was often enough where we got a wide range of responses from people, and some people didn't even look our way. Some people kind of glanced and were interested but didn't have time, and some people were very passionate about it and like really wanted to support it. And then there was the other end of people who
wanted us to get out of the UC.
who wanted to kind of argue, or no one ever tried to get violent or anything. We're not.
That's good.
We're not gonna be dramatic about it. But they
definitely had their 2 cents to put in about it.
Oh yes, I had a lot of heated conversations with people about just the oil industry as a whole. Usually people kind of broaden it enough to be more of an issue of climate change and oil rather than, you know, what our actual petition was looking to do.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot of diversity among Whitewater specifically as far as viewpoints on the issue. Because I think a lot of people are from the local area and they're very concerned with the health and wellness of their environment and their ecosystem. And then there are people who have quite literally said they couldn't care less about the issue, and they don't care as long as they have gas in their car and can get to their job. And interesting, the amount of diversity that's to say the least.
I think like a lot of students, when they see us trying to like stop the expansion of pipelines, they're thinking that we're trying to promote like a political issue of some sort,
yes,
but we're really not. All we're trying to do is trying to protect our environment.
Yeah, we don't want to take political stances. We don't want to, come at anybody's, opinions and that kind of thing. We're just trying to get information across. And what's wrong with information?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good way of thinking about it too, because I do tend to notice a general stigmatism with these issues, especially climate change. It's no secret to anyone that is very politically involved.
Oh, yes.
And some of these issues tend to immediately become political, in my opinion, when they really shouldn't have to be, which is
Especially
a very
this
curious...
year. I think it's just because it's an election year, too. It just kind of gets
it's
down everyone's throats.
Yeah, and I guess you can make a case that's more about like identity politics with that, but all that aside, it's... have you had a chance, at least for people, like, because of course people that are going to walk in and agree, they're just going to sign a petition and go along with you guys if they already walked in knowing what you guys know. But with the people that are more just neutral, unknowing, or against you guys, have you had a chance to have just any useful discussions with these people?
Yeah,
we did have
absolutely.
About 30 minutes of a conversation with a guy from another org that was quite verbal in expressing that he didn't care about our issue, and he really just couldn't care about the health of the ecosystem, and he was taking more of the business economic standpoint. And we just kind of calmly and rationally discussed with him like different sides of the issue, and it was me, John, and one of the co-presidents of our org, Lorenzo. He and I and John just kind of tried to calmly rationalize with this student who was making his opinion very clear.
Yeah. And this particular student, he was like very opinionated on it, but we just had a nice like discussion. We presented what our beliefs were. He presented what his beliefs were, and
he said
while we
he
probably didn't
respected
change
us,
his
and
beliefs.
Yeah, he respected that we had this concern with this issue, but he just made it clear that he didn't really care. Which, I mean, if that's kind of the way he wants to go about it, fine. At least he took the time to discuss with us and kind of see where we were coming from. I think we need more people like that.
Yeah,
we want to get the information.
Just like throughout our tabling events, there was a lot of students who just saw a table and were curious and approached us.
Right.
And
we had
there's plenty of
displays.
people who like had never heard the word tar sands in their life.
Yeah.
And we would probably take like a minute or two just to explain like the general idea and the problems behind tar sands. And a lot of times these people would sign our petition and support our movement, which is awesome. And
it's a great feeling to be able to give information to people who actually had no clue what it was.
Yeah, certainly.
It's showing that our campus as a whole are progressively thinking forward and not just thinking for the short-term time being.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear you guys are having a lot of useful discussions with whether student, faculty, or just other people from Whitewater here that happened to stop by the UC.
We did, we had some faculty too that either signed our petition or at least took the time to talk to us about it. And that's pretty cool too, because it's one thing to have a bunch of students, younger people who are, kind of going along with it, but to have faculty members and people in the actual university, like, what would you call it, backstage, I guess you could say, like the inner workings of it. That's pretty cool too.
This might seem odd, but have you guys had a chance to learn anything new in relation to this topic from other people that have stopped by? Maybe someone was educated on an area that you guys didn't know about, or do you get any interactions like that as well, whether it's from, once again, just going to the UC here, from other campus, like equivalent of the other campus age groups?
I think I'm always learning stuff. Especially just because it's a relatively new thing. I think there's always so much more to be learned, and just every discussion we have with people is just a learning experience too. But I definitely had a lot of people who probably knew more about it than I did at the time, because it was pretty early on in the semester, and that was really awesome to learn from others that I was trying to teach them, but in turn I ended up learning something.
And also, one of the things we've been doing at S.A.G.E this previous semester is we've been trying to have our committee, the tar sands committee, educate the rest of the org about tar sands. And I believe like now as an org as a whole, we're all pretty educated on the topic.
Right,
and we can go up to people and just talk about the issues that we're facing.
Rather than reciting facts, we actually know about it as if it's something like a part of our personal lives rather than just a study topic, really.
Yeah. Awesome. So again, go again more towards the state level. Or it can still be with other stage groups too. What are some of the programs you guys are doing in relations to tar sands, or do you have any objectives or goals you're trying to accomplish within, it could be the next couple of months, could be next year, just a long-term no time period stamp added on?
We have yet to discuss our specific goals for this semester. We have our general member meeting at 6 p.m. in Highland this week. But
Highland 2302, new room this semester.
Alrighty.
Everyone's welcome. So we're going to be discussing our actual specific goals for this semester. We are going to continue probably the petition until the end of the year at least.
I think that is one of our big goals for this semester is to do the process of the statewide movement against Enbridge and to take our signatures to Enbridge and say that the students of Whitewater do not support the expansion of this pipeline.
Because we took it to the student government, didn't we?
Yes.
Before break.
We passed it to the student government.
And we got it through them. So the next step, what is the next step? I actually don't remember.
Well, we're just going to continue to get signatures, and eventually when we feel like we have an adequate number, we're going to take those signatures to Enbridge.
Oh, okay. Then, yeah. As far as specific things, that's pretty much the main goal that we have right now, but...
Yeah, we're definitely taking this through the government at Whitewater, trying to get, as a whole, being able for the university to admit that we are not behind this. As a whole university, we do not support this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably do a couple more films or awareness events around campus.
Absolutely.
Just information. We want to...
We'll be probably doing some like rallying, just trying to get signatures, like around campus and
films, events, maybe. I don't know if we're gonna do like a bake sale for raising money, but last semester we a couple of our members went to the oh my gosh,
Standing Rock.
Yes, Standing Rock, to show our solidarity with them as far as the expansion of the Dakota Access Pipeline. So that's not specifically with our issue with the petition, but as far as a statewide or even, Midwest in general, standing with Standing Rock is something that we are everyone in SAGE is all very unanimously agreeing upon to stop this expansion of this pipeline, which we made a little bit of progress in halting it, but unfortunately it's just going to keep coming back up as an issue, so we're just going to keep powering through and showing our solidarity with them and expressing that we do not support this huge pipeline being expanded.
Yeah, I was definitely one of those students who was fortunate enough to be able to go out there. And so I went up to North Dakota with a few of our members from SAGE, but we also met up with different people from Stevens Point, Madison, Oshkosh, La Crosse. It's definitely a statewide thing to where we're all starting to support. And we really wanted to go up there and not just stand around campus and be like, oh, like, help us stop this. That's a couple states away. We wanted to go out there, stand on the front line and be like, we're from the UW system and we are standing here with Standing Rock.
And bring back information to give to other people too, because they have seen firsthand what it's like. They've seen the sad things about this group of people that has experienced so much
hate,
just a lot of BS. And they're just continuously being exposed to even more. So just working on getting people to also see where we're coming from with that too is a huge part of our whole organization, not just our committee.
Agreed.
Alrighty. One thing I'd like to know too, I suppose this might divert specifically from tar sands a bit too, and doesn't even have to relate to Dakota Access, but in regards to conducting these petitions, and it can be for any, say, environmental event too. How can you take me in a day in a life in that, or how that just kind of goes for someone that might never have done anything like that before? I'm saying
Doing petitions?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't make the actual petition. I was not a part of actually constructing it, but...
So are you, like, asking how we get the signatures, or, like...
I mean, just, like...
process.
Yeah, kind of the process, and maybe unique experiences or happenings of the process that people might not generally be aware of. Because, I mean, we all watch news. We know how petitions go, but is there any, like, other factors that are involved with that just might be interesting to know for people that just never done anything like that?
I mean, you definitely have to be behind the issue that you're the issue that you're starting your petition for, because you definitely have to push your petition in order for people to actually catch notice. You don't want to push your petition in people's faces, but you want to bring it out into the light and be like, this is what I'm standing for. If you would like, come talk to me. I can definitely educate you on the subject, and I can let you know what our petition specifically says, and whether you want to sign it, that's fine by me, but I just want you to at least be educated on what is going on in our world.
Oh, yeah.
The passion has to come through, definitely.
Yeah, see, personally, I carry, like, a copy of the petition everywhere I go. And
As do I.
Okay.
It's just in my backpack, and I try and be, like, vocal and passionate about these issues, and I'm hoping that someone just sees me on campus, like, sees some of the anti-tar sands buttons on my backpack and says, hey, what are tar sands? And then I'm just hoping I have the chance to explain the truth behind them and hopefully get a signature towards the petition. Another thing I did last semester to get signatures on the petition was I had some professors who were, like, offering extra credit just for, like, being sustainable or, like, attending a film. And these professors, they gave me the opportunity to speak in front of my classes about tar sands and their negative effects. And I ended up passing around my petition to, like, the students in my class, and I got a huge amount of signatures, and it felt great.
Yeah, just kind of being the issue rather than putting the hat on. I think it's just like a 24-hour-a-day thing. Like, we have to really carry it with us as we go instead of dedicating an hour to it, you know? Like John is integrating it into his personal life and his classes and getting his professors involved, which is amazing. That's such a good way to get the issue more known. And I think that that's probably the most important part, is just being what you want to come across rather than just verbalizing it, I guess. Being the issue. But we definitely open ourselves up to a lot of criticism when we do this too. So I think it has to be known that if you're going to do something like this, you have to be strong and kind of stand by your beliefs and just be classy about it rather than getting frustrated and offended. Yeah,
I think that the quickest way to ruin any movement you're doing is just to start yelling at the persons that don't know or oppose you. So
people get very defensive and then they shut down, and that's just not. It's just counterproductive when you do that.
In order to get anything done, you have to be willing to see the opposite side.
Yeah, certainly,
definitely.
So it sounds like you guys have definitely done your homework on this topic. So we're getting closer to the end. One last thing I'd like to ask is, in regards to tar sands, let's just once again limit it to the Alberta region and Enbridge here. What would you like to see happen in, it can be short-term or long-term? And is there any potential solutions you can see for maybe the workers or or just even Enbridge in itself? I mean, I don't think there's anything stopping energy companies from transitioning their focus. And of course, that's easier said than done from an economic standpoint. But once again, it's these are goals you guys have that you want to change with tar sands, and just halt the normalization of. So what would you like to see some short-term and long-term effects? And do you have any potential ideas of how to do this? You're not, I don't expect anything like clear cut.
Yeah.
Like things to solve this overnight, but I mean, that makes sense what I'm asking.
In a perfect world, I would love to see all of the oil companies flip-flop to solar or wind companies. That'd be amazing. Like, if we could just, slowly but surely replace oil with renewable. But I think it's definitely easier said than done. So as far as realistic goals, just kind of putting more effort into learning about ways to switch to renewable. I think these companies aren't really even trying. They're just dismissing it and kind of saying that they are.
I think an important first step that all of society needs to take is just take the time to educate yourself on what tar sands are and what their effects are. Because a lot of times people just don't know what they are. And if they knew what they were and they knew their effects, then they would obviously have a strong passion, most likely against it. Unless...
Yeah. And that would make them want to change. I think when you shut yourself down and refuse to accept new information, it's extremely easy to pretend like nothing's wrong and not change anything. But when you get this new information, you start to make changes. Even us as an org over the semester has made so many changes to contribute as much as we can personally.
Yeah.
So if the companies did that, just think of the productivity that we could get with this issue, and I just can't even imagine.
With an issue like tar sands as an extremely controversial issue, I think it's just important to try and gain as much knowledge as you possibly can on it. And with that knowledge, you can use that knowledge to influence other people. So basically that knowledge is just power for yourself.
I think one very realistic goal that I would like to see, preferably short-term, maybe long-term, is the sites specifically, the websites that these companies, the oil companies, are releasing to the public. They're extremely biased to obviously benefit them. Like, they're not going to bash themselves on their own websites, but I would just like to see more realism in what they're releasing to people rather than kind of glorifying themselves. It's a very money and job focused website rather than the harmful effects of it. So I would like to see them be more honest, just honesty and openness about, yes, we understand what we're doing and we are trying to fix it, but for now, this is how we're benefiting something. It's very easy to do that. And if you show the negative things that are occurring, but then put your little plug of positive things, it kind of balances out and gives people real information rather than, making it all happy and cheerful and look at us, we're making jobs and we're letting you drive a car. Like, we can't have that kind of information because that's where the misunderstandings breed.
It's more saying it's a fallacy, just like limiting solutions. That of course that if I as someone that works in communication specifically, I know that many companies will release half truths where they're not lying, they're not saying anything wrong.
Exactly.
But they're not analyzing, they're not honestly analyzing the pros and the cons of their product or their service. So
I've done a lot of research and looking at their sites specifically, and I've taken note of every single site. They just put the nice things and refuse to even acknowledge the not so nice things. Which I'd like to see that change in the future, the near future, because it's now in 2017, couple days or one day after the inauguration, it's very important for us to take hold of this issue and really put it into high gear now. Like, this is the time. Now has never been a more terrifying moment for our Earth than what we are going through right now.
What humanity does in the next 10 to 20 years will affect the future of the planet for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's extremely important for these things to be taken seriously. And if I could say one specific thing that I want to change, it would be for people to take it seriously and stop dismissing it and at least accept information. Maybe not make changes or whatever. If you want to be stubborn about that, go ahead. Just take what we're giving you and just learn and educate yourself. And that's probably the realest goal that there is just wanting people to be smarter and be open.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end off this conversation. I think that the best way to persuade people is to certainly have these reasonable conversations. I believe most people are reasonable themselves, and will try to be as non-biased as possible. And if you do that efficiently, people will start seeing your points, which just sounds like it's been working. So thank you very much, guys, for having me on today.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you for having us.
For our listeners here today, especially those that are Whitewater students, how can people reach out to you guys and get in contact for any reason?
Well,
S.A.G.E at uw.edu.
yeah, if there's any questions about S.A.G.E or anything that we're doing, feel free to send an email to S.A.G.E at uww.edu. If not, you can feel free to reach out to me personally at brand JA18. So that's BRANDJA18 at uww.edu. And if you got any questions or want to contact me to maybe sign the petition or something, feel free to send anything my way. I'll be happy to take it.
And our general member meetings are at 6 p.m. in Highland.
2302.
So you can come anytime and just get some knowledge, learn some stuff.
It's a blast. It's a
Hang out
very
with some
friendly,
cool kids.
positive atmosphere. And
Yes.
no matter what your environmental passion is, S.A.G.E is for you. We got committees for veganism, plastic, styrofoam, tar sands, and divestment, which is the committee we're representing. But yeah, S.A.G.E as a whole, it's a blast. I would recommend it to anyone and everyone. Give it a chance this week. It'll be fun.
All right, I'm glad you bring that up too, because I'd like to remind our audience that for next week, next Sunday at 11 a.m., we'll be discussing about plastics. And the week after that, we'll be talking about vegetarianism and veganism.
Wow.
So I think that'll be some really interesting discussions to be had like we did today.
Yes.
So, hey, thanks again so much, you guys, for coming on today. I
thank you
think it's
very
been a
much.
very useful, insightful conversation.
Yes,
I
definitely.
appreciate it.
Alrighty. Well, everyone, you've been listening to 91.7 The Edge, WSCW Whitewater. This has been the Wisconsin Farms Radio Show, brought to you by the Wisconsin Farms Oral History Project. If you want to learn more about us, find us on Facebook at Wisconsin Farms Oral History Project, or on our website at wisconsinfarms.org. We're always looking to find new farmers and agriculture people within the industry in Wisconsin and learn about your story. So stay tuned in for next week for Sunday at 11. And until then, have a great weekend.